Since you're going to be spending such a great deal of time looking at the composition panel, it's a good idea if we get to know it very well. And of course, there are a lot of buttons that actually surround this panel. So I'm going to just nudge its neighbors over just a little bit. And let's talk about the buttons that we'll use most commonly when we're working with this particular panel. The first thing you'll notice, of course, is that you can right-click in it and choose a new viewer, a new text, solid, camera, etc. And you can change some of the options here as well. So you can do a RAM preview, a wireframe preview, switch to 3D view if we have a 3D mode enabled. And don't worry, we'll talk more about that much later on. We can also look at a flowchart so we can see everything that's involved in our comp. And we can always go back to our comp over here. So we have our tabs as well, so anything that's attached to this panel. We can, of course, always choose different comps if we have more than one open by going to this drop down. So we can go to comp 1, comp 5, or whatever you have open. You can always do the same thing down here as well. So the same functionality that you'll find down here is up here. We can also go to our pop-up and undock this panel. We can see our options, our composition settings, which we talked about already, by going to this menu. And we can also enable frame blending, enable motion blur, and more. Now let's talk about the buttons down here, and the most commonly used ones. First of all, you're always going to be going here because you want to change your magnification when you're doing things like special effects. A good example is, let's say you want to add a glow to a window. You might want to zoom in just a little bit so you can see it more clearly. By the way, because this panel is currently selected, you can hit the tilde key to maximize it. This holds true for any of the panels. Just hover your mouse over it and move your mouse, and you can always go back to another panel to maximize it. If you want to look at rulers or a grid or anything else like title action safe, you can find it with this button right here. You can also go to a specific time in your composition by clicking this button. Just enter where you want to go, and then you'll be taken to that part of your comp. So if I go ahead and enter, let's say 10, hit OK, I'm moved in that position in my timeline. And you can see it right here as well. I can also take a snapshot and look at the last snapshot that I took. I can also see different channels in my composition. So if I want to just look at the blue channel and see which pixels are actually blue, I can do that with this button. And I can see which ones are green, red, and RGB, which is red, green, and blue, composited on top of each other to give you all the colors you see. I can also look at the resolution here in a way that will speed up my workflow. As you can see, by choosing full, I can see the pixels pretty accurately. If I go to half, I lower that, and of course I can continue until I get to quarter, or I can choose custom from the list. This will allow you to work more efficiently because the pixels are somewhat degraded as you work. But don't worry, this is not how it's going to look when you finish your comp. This is pretty much just so you can work more quickly and put less strain on your processor. What I can also do is if I want to focus on a particular part of an image or a comp, I can click this button to draw out a region of interest, as you see here. And I can just focus on that part of my comp. If I want to see what pixels are transparent, I can turn this on. And don't forget, this grid means that nothing's really here. So if I want to see an alpha channel and I want to see what pixels are not going to be there, I can turn that on. If I'm working in 3D mode, I can choose the camera that I want to deal with. So I can choose the custom view or any of these to see my scene from different angles. I can also change how I'm viewing my scene as well by changing how many cameras I'm looking at or how many views. So don't forget, if you want to go to your flowchart, you can go here as well. And this is pretty much what you'll be using mostly when you're dealing with After Effects. And we'll be dealing with the timeline, of course, later on as well. So we'll talk about how to use the timeline because we're going to be using this all over the place when we want to animate things and have effects moving across the screen. So you can always jump to your timeline by clicking this little button right here. And that is how you use the composition panel in After Effects CS4.